Everybody mute themselves, please.
Kum Leonard Ablat Gemara. We are up to the Gimel of an Aleph and Masech Kesuvos. Just very quickly, by the way, that a Kesuvos, that's the document you do for marriage. And in the introduction I gave to the other share, there's a big argument. There's 4 opinions whether it's from the Torah, this document based on the pasuk that if you seduce a girl, you have to pay 50 shkolim. Kimoyar Hapsul, like a dowry of girls. So that is the question: is a dowry of girls that's a ksuva, or that's only from the Rabbanan and Smachta? How much do you put in the ksuva? Is $200. The word moihar, kimoyar, one of the Mefarshim say, is actually broken up into 2 words. Kimoyar is kama, how much? Reish, 200. You give 200 dinarim. That's what you give. And we'll talk more about it when we get to the Yubez and other places. Okay, so the last thing we were discussing is whether the concept of an oinus is an excuse, and you say that I haven't met my condition, it's not my fault, I'm an oinus. So in other words, yesh oinus begitten, just like we learned before, we paskin like the first day that the 12 months expire and the husband has to provide for his wife. But if it's because someone was sick, it was an oinus, then it's not considered as if it expired and we give them a bit extra time. It's the same thing here. By gittin, do we say there's an oinus by gittin as well? That means that if you said you're not going to come back at a certain time, but the reason why you didn't come back is because an accident occurred. Therefore, it's as if you didn't meet. If we don't say, oh, you didn't come back, and therefore it's a valid get. No, we say, yes, oinus, it's a valid argument that the reason why I didn't come is not because I didn't want to, I couldn't help it. So therefore, the Tanai has not been met, or ein oinus begittin. And the first opinion we said was ein oinus begittin. I don't care why you didn't come back. The fact is you didn't come back. And therefore, the get is a valid get. And we said it's based on logic. Rava has no basis in halacha, just on logic, because he's worried about the women who are very frum, the tznuas, and those who are very promiscuous will take advantage of the situation. Okay, so now the Gemara is basically saying here, so it means according to the Torah, there is an oinus by gittin, which means according to the Torah, it's not a valid get because he didn't meet the conditions. The rabbis decided to turn it into a valid get. So that the Gemara has now dealing with a problem, which we also had in Gemara Yevamos, by the way, and that is if according to the Torah, she's still a married woman, how can the Rabbana come along and say, nope, she's no longer a married woman? How do they just unravel a marriage? So this is the Gemara we're up to here. But the 4 lines at the top of the page. Is there such a thing? The Midaraisa have a get. The Torah says no, it's not a valid get because it wasn't their fault. It was an oinus, and therefore it's not as if he met the Tanai, the condition. And yet the Mishum Truas, the Mishum Prutzis, and because of this logic, we're worried about the Tznuas who will always worry that maybe it's an oinus and they'll remain in Aguna the rest of their lives, or the Prutzis will always say it's not an oinus, and they say, yeah, we're divorced, even in the case where it was, and therefore they're really technically a married woman, they're going to go get married again. So Shadin and HD's Lama, are we going to permit a woman, a married woman? The Torah says she's a married woman. The Torah says he didn't meet the condition and because it was an oinus, and therefore the get is not a valid get. She's still a married woman. How can the rabbi come along and say, yes, go ahead and get remarried? So the Gemara says, yes, because kol de mekadosh adaita de rabbanon mekadosh. When we get married, the way Rashi learns is we say under the chuppah that you're engaged to me, kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, like the traditions of Moshe v'Yisrael. Therefore, it's like you're giving it over to the hands of the rabbis and saying, as long as I agree, I'm following your terms and conditions, it's a valid chuppah. And if it's not a valid condition. So therefore, we have a right to undo the kedusha and say that the money is not. But Tosha says in Yevamos, the rabbanon have a right to make the money hefker. It's as if the money never belonged to the man, and therefore they were never engaged. Fine. If this makes sense, Kaddish Bekasma, if she gave her money for Kiddushin, but what about Kaddish B'Biyah? What happens? The 3 ways of getting engaged to a woman. The 3rd way in the Mishnah there is via marital relations. My Ikal and Meimar. What are the rabbis going to do in this case? Are they going to take the Kiddushin and the Biyah that they had and do what with it? That was the money, they can make it hefker. But what happens with the Biyah? Now, true, if they say that the money is hefker, that means they were never married. So all the years they lived together, they lived as nus. But the rabbis are not making it nus. The rabbis are just saying the money you gave was never your money, so you're never married. And the rest is just a consequence. But over here, the rabbis are dealing directly with the biyah. What are they doing with this biyah? Are they going to turn it into znus? Yes. Shabi Rabban Libotzi Bilas Nus. They will turn into Nus. So this is how Rashi learns. Rashi says an interesting thing. He says that all my rabbis, not one, but all my rabbis, learn a different shot in the Gemara. They all learn that when you give a ring to a woman to get engaged to, it's only Mirabbanan. Bia is from the Torah, a ring or a star, a document is only Midrabbanan. And the Gemara's question therefore is, okay, since the Kedushin is only Midrabbanan, so they have a right to undo it. But Bia, which is from the Torah, how can the Rabbanan intervene? That's the Gemara's question. And Rashi rejects it out of hand, because he says we're going to learn at the beginning of Kedushin that how do we know that one of the formats of marrying, of getting engaged to someone is with money, and that is because we have Gzera Shava, Kicha Kicha. It says Kiyikach Ishisha, and by Abraham Avinu it says Kachas HaKesef. So we know from there that it's talking about money. So Rashi says that giving a ring to a woman or giving money is from the Torah, but he says all my Rebbe says with the Rabbanan. In the Rambam itself, there's a big debate because he uses the words Medivrei Sefer. And there's a big debate. What does the Rambam mean when he says Medivrei Sefer? Does it mean it's from the rabbis? Or does it mean that the rabbis explain the Torah? So it's really from the Torah. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara.
If the rabbis have that power to annul the marriage, why don't they do that in the case of a guna?
Very good. Why don't the rabbis annul? The rabbis do not annul the marriage only if you went against. You did against the halachic way or something. The rabbi came along and they undid the marriage. Or over here, when we have a reason because of the tnuas and the prutus that we are worried that something's going to happen, so we undo the marriage. But stamazeh, we don't undo the marriage because we don't want to weaken the institution of marriage. Because then what happens is that every time I don't know. If you make it too easy, let's put it this way: if you make it too easy to get out of marriage, it weakens the whole institution of marriage. And the Rabbanan thought it's worth much more to keep the marriage intact and only in exceptions to undo it. And whatever the Chazal didn't think of something, we cannot on our own come along and say, let's undo the marriage. There was actually a case just recently where a rabbi in Philadelphia came along, a literature rabbi, and undid a marriage to help out an aguna, and he was basically attacked by all the Rabbanim in Israel. You cannot just weaken the whole institution of marriage. It's a very fine line, I guess.
I mean, when the husband refuses to give a get, isn't that going against the rabbis?
If the husband refuses to give a get, there's other ways of coercion. But in Israel, it's a lot easier than anywhere else in the world, because in Israel, the bezdins are recognized by the courts, so they can do things. It's the rest of the world that has a problem. The real question came along with Tosfos asked, why don't we undo mamzer? I mean, mamzer is not the kid's fault. Let's undo the marriage in the first place. She was never married to the first husband, so she wasn't a married woman when she had relations with this guy, and therefore the children are mamzer, just out of wedlock. And basically, Tosfos there in Gittin, in Ashaleach, and other places, it says we don't want to find ways to, I guess, allow this kind of behavior. If you find ways to allow this kind of behavior, it weakens the whole institution of marriage, and more people will commit adultery, and there's always a way out. It's a fine line. It's a very difficult, I guess, decision to make, to weigh these things up. The sanctity of marriage and this importance of the institution of marriage versus if a woman remains in aguna, or in the case where the children are mamzerim, no fault of their own, and so on. Big issues. And that's yeah. Okay, so that's one version of the Gemara. The second version of the Gemara is exactly the opposite, which is that the Gemara said, what did Rava say? That Rava came along and actually said, Ikadam Yada say, Amar Rava says Rava, that no, that even with Rabbana, that there is a taina of einus by Gittin. If they come along and say that there was an einus, then the fact is you didn't meet the Tanai, and therefore because you didn't meet the Tanai, the get is not a valid get. And because the fact he didn't meet the Tanai. Says the Gemara, Alma Kasava Rava holds, Yesh Einus Begittin. So everything that we used before in the Gemara yesterday to support Rava, that there's no Einus, now we're going to use as a question to ask how can say it is an Einus. So for example, Mesa has a question, he says to his wife, this is your divorce, he'll not back within 12 months, but Mace. And we use an example of someone, an accident happened, couldn't meet the condition, died, but ain't a get. Now, what's the reason? There's two possibilities why mace is not a get. Either because what do you call it? You can't give a get once the person passes away. Who's giving the get? Is because ain't get achamisa, or the reason because it was an accident, and because it was an accident, you didn't meet the condition. Yes, tinus oinus begitin. So which one is it? If the reason is because it's an accident, and an accident means you didn't meet the condition willingly, then why give an example, such a drastic example of mace? Give a better example. Somebody's sick, couldn't come back within 12 months, and tell me that it's not a get. Because it's not that he willingly didn't come back. It's that he was a chaylu or something happened. Why did we say that? Doesn't that prove that the only exception is mace? Because once he's dead, he can't give a get. But if an accident happened, there's no such taina. The fact is he didn't return. So we see from here, ain't tainas oinus legitim. Ask the Gemara. It seems mace would ain't a get only if he died. Chaylu got sick, he's a get. So we see that there's no oinus begitim. Says the Gemara. Exactly what the Gemara said before. We're going to say now. Really makes no difference. Died, even if he died, it's not a valid get because there is a time of oinus by get. But the higuv kamash, what the Mishnah is trying to teach you is the law that you cannot give a get once a person dies. They ain't get lachamis. That's the purpose of the Mishnah. Not into talking about oinsin. It's out to tell you that you cannot give a get once the person dies. Says the Gemara, we know that already. Ain't get lachamis. We know that very same Mishnah in the beginning. The Gemara answers, and the Gemara before he quoted that. The Gemara answers, no. The purpose of the Mishnah is we had the Rabbi Seinu, Rabbi Yossi, who says that if you say that this get should take place in 12 months and the person dies in the middle, if there's a date recorded in the get, which date? The date of writing the get. Rabbi Yossi says, why did you bother writing today's date? You're saying clearly that the get should not take effect for another 12 months. So why do you have to write today's date? You know why he wrote today's date? Because in case in 12 months he doesn't return, it's retrospective that the get is valid from today and onwards. So that's what they hold. So our Mishnah will tell you, I disagree. I hold that if the get was not written till after, if even though it's today's date, if it not clearly say that the get should be retrospective, the get does not take efficacy until after the person died, and therefore it's not a valid get. Tashma, come here. Another proof.
That is specifying retrospectivity.
Only if you wrote the word ma'achsha or mahayim. But if you just wrote today's date, the date that you wrote the get, you didn't specify you want to take effect today. On the contrary, you wrote in the get, it should take effect in 12 months.
Yeah, but in the beginning, when it starts a few lines out, Meisrei, Harry Zikitach Imla Basi Mikan Vachemot Zachodesh.
Yeah.
Well, it's Mikan. He's specified.
Yeah, but he didn't say that the get should take place now.
Harry Zikitach.
He didn't say that the get should take place now. He says, if I'm not back within 12 months from today, this is how he says in English. If I am not back in 12 months from today, mikant, from today, start counting the 12 months. But he's not saying it should take effect today. He's saying,
he's specifying it retrospectively.
No, he's not. He's specifying how to count the 12 months. Don't start counting from next week. Don't start counting from Chodesh. Start counting from today, the 12 months. But when does it take effect? If I'm not back in 12 months, it takes effect then.
Yeah, right. But
that's not called retrospective.
In other words, Brian, the Mikan is on the date. It's not relating to the get itself. It's relating to the time frame from when the get will take effect. It'll take effect in 12 months.
From today, exactly.
When the 12 months starts.
Exactly.
Where are we holding?
I don't know. Somebody please tell them. We're
3A2, right-hand column, second paragraph. 3A2, right-hand column, second paragraph.
Square.
Okay, you want to continue. Toshma, come in here. I'll bring another proof, which we had yesterday. Yesterday was a support. Today it's a question. But here he clearly stipulated. I want the get to be retrospective from today. When? I'm back in 12 months. He died within 12 months. So the fact is he didn't come back. Therefore, it's a get retrospectively. How does he get? Now, my love, it would seem to me the same thing would apply who are din l'chayla. If a major accident, which is mace, it's not their fault at all that he couldn't come back. He's dead. Hard for him to come back after he's dead. So in such a case, still we say the fact is he didn't come back. It's a valid get. So surely if he's merely sick, surely it's not a very big einus. Surely the fact that he didn't come back, it's a get retrospectively. So what do we see from here? That ain tainus einus legitin. The einus is not an excuse. Says more like no. Meiz davka. If the reason why he didn't come back is because he's sick, then then we say, well, it's a good taina. The einus is a good taina, and it's as if you did come back, and the get is not a valid get. But Mace is different. Why? Let's understand what's going in his head. Why did he give a get to his wife? The reason why he gave a get to his wife is that childless, and he doesn't want her to end up in the humiliation of a chalitza and all that. He's trying to help her out. So the whole purpose is he wants the get to be effective. So if he died and he didn't come back, surely the get should be valid, because that's what he wanted. He's trying to spare her the humiliation of a chalitza or having to live with his brother. So again, no proof. And we hold, according to this version, yesh tainus einus legit. Tashma coming in, a guy said, I'm not back in 30 days, let it be a good get. Also, he actually came back within 30 days, but suddenly it was a flood or something, it was a river between the two, divided the city. He couldn't get to his house, or he couldn't get into the city. But it's not his fault, it was an accident, there's a river flooded. And he screamed out, look, I'm here, look, I'm back. Shmuel said, this is not called come back. You did not come back. In other words, we say that the einus is not an excuse. The fact is, he didn't come back. So we see there's no taina of einus, not like Rava said. So we answer this kind of an einus which is common. You should have anticipated. So you should have spelled it out. You should have said, "I'll be back within 30 days." But then he should have said, "But if the river, flooded again and hold me back, then that shouldn't count." But since you should have anticipated this einus, you didn't mention it, so therefore it's not considered an einus, and the fact is you're not back, too bad. The kivin yiboy lesno, you should have included it in your condition. Well, he didn't. He would have said it's your loss. Okay, back to the bottom line. We have two opinions if there's an einus by gittin, and not the halacha is that there is no einus by gittin, and so on.
Are we also not trying to also prove that there's get after misa?
No. The halacha is there's definitely no get after misa, because once the person is dead, who's giving it? We also try to disprove. We say that the Mishnah that we talked about argues with Rabbi Yossi that says manish or star mechichalov. If you date it, we had an argument. That's where we had an argument. How do we understand a get with the current date when you don't want it to take effect for another 6 months? You said in 6 months it should be valid get, but you wrote today's date. What does that mean? What are you trying to say?
That's
the argument.
So have we come to a conclusion to that question?
Yeah, there's an argument, Rabbi Yossi and our Stam Mishnah. The Stam Mishnah here perhaps argues with Rabbi Yossi and says that it's not, we ignore the date recorded in the star, or we look at it, you said 6 months, so that's when the get takes place. So the person dies.
So that's it.
Beforehand.
If the guy died at the 3 month point and the get takes effect at the 6 month point, then it proves that get after misa.
So we said there's two. No. The law is that it's not a valid get, right? The first part of the Mishnah said it's not a valid get because ein get lachar misa. Rabbi Yossi says it is a valid get because you said that if I'm not back within 6 months, so she has to wait till the 6 months. When the 6 months expire, Rabbi Yossi says it's retrospective 3 months before he died, so it's a valid get. It's been activated, but it doesn't get activated until the 6 months, until that date. The date that he's stipulating to get 6 months from now. So it's an argument, it remains an argument of Yossi and the Chacham. So now we said you get married on Wednesday afternoons, so that so Wednesday night you can have relations, and if there's any issues there, you can go run to the Bezdin on Thursday morning. This only started with Takonas Ezra Elich. Ezra made a special takana. In Ezra's takana, we learned Baba Kama, the 8 Pedic, and 10 takanas that Ezra made. Also reading the Torah and all these other things. So Ezra, the takana was that Bezdin should convene on Mondays and Thursdays. Only on Mondays and Thursdays. But prior to that, so because it's only Mondays and Thursdays, so therefore you get married on Wednesday. Why we don't get married on Sunday? We already mentioned before, because the Chachamim said we need 3 days to prepare for the wedding. But before Takanas Ezra, a Bezdin used to convene every single day, then Isha Nisas b'chol yom, every day. Now, it doesn't mean a woman cannot get married on Shabbos or Friday night because it's an acquisition and you're not allowed to acquire anything on Shabbos. So Mara says, why are you telling us about Takanos Ezra? What happened before Takanos Ezra? What's the relevance of that? Says the Gemara, this is what he meant to say. If we have bezins today that are kavua, every day, it's just like before Takanos Ezra, which is what? That you can get married any day you want because bezins were fixed every day. Now, the Gemara later on, that Hayes will tell us that almana, widows, get married on Thursday because it's a special day, it's a bracha for the fish. So why don't we say the same thing by a psula, that she should get married on a Thursday? So the Rishonim already say that even though we say it's a bracha on Thursday, the reason why by a psula, she has 7 days of Sheva brachas. And during those 7 days of Sheva brachas, the husband doesn't go to work, so they spend time with each other to get to know each other. An almana only has 1 night of Sheva brachas. So therefore, the husband might go the next morning, wake up and go to work, and they'll never have a chance to really get to know each other. So therefore, we said, you know what? For 3 days, we want you to not to work. So we make sure that Thursday they get married, and you already have Shabbos coming up. So Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, he doesn't work and he spends time with her. So that's why we encourage them, to get married on Thursday. That's the real reason, not because it's a bracha or anything else. Now, it says the Rishonim say you shouldn't get married on Friday, because on Shabbos, you can't have a bezin. So if you get married on Friday, the first time you can go to a bezin is on Sunday. That's 2 days away. That's too far. So you should not get married on Fridays. So the Rishonim say, how come we do get married on Fridays today? So the Ritva and other Rishonim say is because today we are very poor. And Friday is the cheapest day to make a wedding because Friday night, anyway, you have to have a Shabbos meal. Friday night, everybody dresses up Shabbos anyway. So if you want to, and you want to have a cheap way of making a wedding, there's no better way than Friday. So times have changed, circumstances have changed. Taisus, however, says that even though we don't have a bezin on official bezin on Shabbos, you could always call 3 people together, gather 3 people together on Shabbos to hear you out. And therefore, you can get married on Friday, no problem. And what do you call it? And if you have any issues, you can always call 3 people together on Shabbos. There are a number of people now that are starting to make weddings on Friday. They're coming back as and it's actually quite nice. Okay, back to the Gemara. Each and I wouldn't get married every single day, except we discussed whether you get married on Friday, and definitely not on Shabbos because you can't make a kinyan on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, but how can you get married every day? How can you get married, for example, on Sunday or on Monday? We said before, we want 3 days that the husband should work hard to prepare the wedding. Why is it that we want 3 days the husband should work hard to prepare the wedding? So that if he worked hard and spent a lot of money on the wedding, then he won't wake up the next morning and if he, for whatever reason, is not very happy, just walk out. Because you spent all this time, you're going to invest time and effort to make sure that this marriage works. That's what some of the Rishonim say. So Shaktu, they work very hard and so on. So when answer is yes, the Triyachle, even though you got married on Sunday and Monday, you prepared beforehand a couple of days. So you're all prepared and all ready. The other reason why, the other Rishonim say, the reason why we said that you have to prepare 3 days before the wedding, we're not talking about preparing just for the wedding. We actually wanted to prepare for all the Sheva brachas as well. This way that the husband doesn't have to go to work, doesn't have an excuse, and can spend time with his kala. So that's why we want them to spend 3 days. The time we learned. Why did we say psul nisasabi? Why did you say the psul should get married on Wednesdays? In case he has any concerns that maybe during the 12 months of engagement, she perhaps had an affair with somebody else. The bezin Thursday morning before he really gets to know her yet. He won't have any rachmanos to go to a bezin. And could be, the problem is that they're not allowed to live together. What do you mean not live together? If he was a kohen, and she had an affair, there's only one suffix. Did the affair happen before they got engaged, or that happened after they got engaged? If it's before they got engaged, she can live with her husband. If it's after, regardless of whether it was by coercion or she did it on her own will, out of her own will, in both cases she cannot live with her husband. So therefore, it's important for him to go to Bezdin to know whether they can live together. And once we say that when it comes to, this is how Rabbi Tam learns, and once we say when it comes to the case of a kohen, they cannot live together, so we decided that all women that all women should follow suit and they should all get married on Wednesday for this reason. Because every other woman is not forbidden to her husband. Because every other woman is a svek. Did it happen before they got engaged or after they got engaged? And even was afterwards, was it by coercion or was it voluntary? And if it's voluntary, it's forbidden, but coercion is permitted. And therefore, here we have an example where the majority follow the minority. The majority of women that would not be forbidden to the husband, we still have to get married on Wednesday because of the minority women. And the only other example we have of that is Friday nights in shul. When we daven Friday night in shul, we say Vaychulu a second time. We say Vaychulu during Shemoneh Esrei, and we say it once again right after Shemoneh Esrei. Why do we say it again after Shemoneh Esrei? We just said it. The reason why we say it after Shemoneh Esrei is because if Yom Tov falls out on Friday night, we say a different Shemoneh Esrei, and there is no Vaychulu. Now, how often does it happen that Yom Tov falls out on Friday night? Even if it does, it's 3 Friday nights a year. And how often and how many years does it happen? And yet every single Friday night, every single year, we say Vaychulu after Shemoneh Esrei because a few instances where it's necessary. So here you have another example where the majority it follows the minority. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Hayamashkel bezin, wake up in bezin, v'tinose. So you want to ask a question. V'tinose be'echa b'Shabbos, and let him get married on Sunday. And why can't he get married on Sunday? The same thing. Bezin convene on Monday and Thursday. Some of the Rishonim say that before Ezra, they all want to know what did Ezra exactly do. If before Ezra, Bezin would sit every day, came along Ezra and said Mondays and Thursdays, he didn't make a new takana. In fact, he canceled Bezin. It's not a takana. He came along and said, don't sit every day, only Monday and Thursday. So what actually happened here? So some learned before Ezra came along, the Bezin did not convene on a permanent basis. If somebody had a court case, they would convene the Bezin. Came along Ezra and said, no, every Monday and Thursday, everyone should know the Bezin is open, so people then can come. Others say that Bezin was open every day, but there was no set time. What Ezra did was, he said, you know what? Let's make it Monday and Thursday, the entire day. And that's what Ezra did. So he went further. Or others say, a third opinion is, before Ezra, you had a city here, a city there, and Ezra came along and said, every single city should have a Bezin. Okay, I can't have it every day, so it's Monday and Thursday, but it's better that every city has their own Bezin, except Melbourne, Australia, when it comes to commercial disputes. Says the Gemara further. The im hayaloi tainis psulim. Look, the most part of the question: why not on Sunday? And if he has any concerns, hayamashkel bezin, he'll go on Monday to bezin. Says the Gemara, shaktu chachamim atakanu b'nei Yisrael. The chachamim work diligently to help out the Jewish girls. Sheyadam tareach besudah shloisha yami. We want a person to work 3 days for the meal, as obviously as close as possible. So echad b'Shabbos, b'sheni b'Shabbos, b'shlishi b'Shabbos, Sunday and Tuesday. U'b'levi on Wednesday, claims to get married. Wednesday by day, by the way, not Wednesday night. That's Leil Chamishi. Wednesday by day. Umesakana the Eilich. Once it became a sakana, the Gemara was going to explain what exactly the sakana was. They modified the takana, and he said, you know what? We're going to get married on Tuesdays. And the Chacham did not stop them. There's a whole discussion here. How can they come along and overturn? If we learned in Gemara Be'ed Avav there, once a bezin makes a rule, a later bezin cannot come and alter it, even if there's a good reason, unless they're larger in number and quality and in quantity. How can they do that? So some of them are trying to say, from here's a proof. That interesting idea that if that previous bezin was alive today, would they themselves have changed it for these circumstances? Then we can go ahead and change it. Others say the Rambam said there's a difference between a minig and a takana. A minig you can change, the minig, if it's only a minig, then if it's minig change, you can change. If it's a takana, then nobody can change it. So maybe we'll say this is more like a takana. So Gemara continues.
Just a minute. Didn't we also have situations where the Rabbanon where Bezdin could see that the Olam weren't keeping the halacha, and they changed the halacha to suit the Olam because the Olam weren't keeping halacha.
Yeah, we had that in Avodah Zarah, but that was the very same Bezin who made the law in the first place. It wasn't the Bezin 2 generations later who did that. We had that by oil. In fact, we just had yesterday the Bezin who was matter the oil. Remember, the Bezin was matter the oil because that's what they were known for. They was the one who asked it, and they were matter because it showed that nobody was keeping it. It was too difficult. Okay, the Gemara continues. Anyway, from the Sakanan onwards, they decided to start getting married on Tuesdays, and we'll come back to this. Didn't protest. But don't get married on Monday. They did not get married on Mondays. They got married on Tuesday, as close as possible to the Thursday.
Where's the place?
If there was more, if it's not a sakana but an oinus that they were compelled to, and the Gemara will soon explain what the oinus is, then mutter, then you can even go to Monday as well.
Where's the
The
place
Gemara-
now, please? Where's the place in English?
Somebody to place, please.
3B1, left-hand column, last paragraph.
Which one?
3B1, left-hand column, last
3B1.
paragraph.
Thank you.
Okay. Umafrishin es hachosim min hakala leile Shabbos tchila. We don't encourage. In fact, we separate the chos and the kala. We don't want them to have their first relationship Friday night. That's the Gemara learned of. Hey, what exactly is the issue there? Because remember, girls got married very young, and they had a hymen, and you would rip the hymen on Friday night. And there's a problem that the Gemara will discuss what malacha are you contravening. Now the Gemara wants to know. So sakana, we brought it back to Tuesday. If it's oinus, we brought it forward to Monday. What's a sakana and what's an oinus? My sakana, what's a sakana? Elaim, if you're going to tell me the Amri, they made a decree. Because these people want to undermine our religion. As soon as they found out that the rabbi said it has to be on Wednesday, so they made a decree that anyone who gets married on Wednesdays, Teharik should be put to death. So nagu. So why did you say they had a custom to get married on Tuesday? This is sakanas nefashos. Then for sure you should say no one should get married on Wednesday. Only get married on Tuesday. What do you mean nagu? Nagu sounds like they did it on their own volition. In fact, we had the Gemara Yivama that nagu means we wouldn't paskin this way. They just did it on their own. Omar Abba says, I'll tell you what happened. To Amri, they said, "Besula hanisad b'yom revi." Any girl, unfortunately, in history, this happened in many cases, and governors and fiefdoms and everything else, where the owner of the land would say that any girl that's married in my territory first has to have relations with me. B'yom revi, any girl, which basically is the Jews, tiboil lahegmet chila, must the first time has to have relations with the leader there, the governor, whatever it is. Says the Gemara. So why you say? What do you mean sakana? So there's no sakana here. You use the word sakana. There's no sakana here. Nobody's going to die. Oinasu. You should use the correct word. The proper word would be fanainis. They have no choice because of this situation. You get married on Tuesday. Sakana means that you're going to be threatened with life and death. Where's the life and death here? So the Gemara, yes, there is. From the Ikat Snuas, there were very from women that decided, you know what, better to die than to have relations with that guy. The Masr Nafshai Liktala, they would kill themselves. And they wouldn't go to that guy. Or they would say, you know, we don't mind if you kill us. We're not going to that guy. So there is a question of life and death. That's why we call it sakana. And therefore, they went ahead and got married on Tuesday. But asla de sakana, by not going and complying, they're putting their life in danger. Says the Gemara, instead of changing, look how the Gemara maintains how important a takana chacham is. You know what? So instead of changing the takana chachamim, let's say get married on Wednesday, leave the takana intact, and unfortunately, if they have to go to the hegman, you have no choice. And tell them you're not supposed to die for it. And tell them in this circumstance, the guy, you know, you have no choice. You're not doing an avera. You don't have a choice. You're an oinus. Says the Gemara, and tell the tznu is the same thing. So why change it to takana chachamim? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. There's two reasons. First of all, ika prutzis. Now, women who will take advantage, what do they take advantage? That they actually appreciate the guy giving them recognition, and therefore they'll go willingly. And the problem is they go willingly, they can no longer live with their chassan. They can no longer live with their husband because they willingly had they're a married woman or engaged woman. They willingly had an affair with somebody else, us as a husband, number one. And the economic honest. And some of these girls are marrying a kohen, and a kohen, even if the wife was forced into it, they can no longer live together. Says the Gemara, okay, in that case, so why don't we just then completely let's completely cancel the Kanz Chamim. Why tell me that Kanz Chamim is that important? Says the Gemara, we want to maintain the Takanas Chamim. This Gezerah, one day, this Hegman will die, the Gezerah will be repealed. But takanta d'rabbanan mekam gzeira, because this takana started before the gzeira came into place. Lo yakrin. We want to maintain it. We don't want to cancel it. Now, all the Rishonim have here a very interesting discussion and big ramifications in halach. The Gemara says, why don't we just tell the girl? Why don't we just tell the girl that she wants? She can. What do you call it? That it's an oinus, it's not your fault. So Taisus and all the Rishonim ask. We know that 3 averis a person is supposed to die for. One of them is gila arayis. So in other words, how in the world she's a married woman? That's gila arayis, having a relation with somebody else. What do you mean? Tell the woman there's no problem. It's an oinus, it's not your fault. The 3 averis you're supposed to die for. So okay, so we have a big argument there. The Rivam says that it's a difference of a man or a woman. A man who is actively involved in Avera has to be prepared to die for it. A woman is passive. And because a woman is passive, she does not have to die for it. She's called karka olam. She's passive. It's the man who's doing all the activity, and therefore she doesn't have to die for it. Just like in the case of murder, if the guy comes over to you and says, kill that person, otherwise we kill you, you're not allowed to. But if the guy says, you stand still, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to throw you against that person, and that person is going to die, you don't have to run away. You can stand, otherwise we'll kill you. You can stand still because you're passive, you're not doing anything. That's the Rivam. Rabbeinu Tam comes with a big chiddush. Rabbeinu Tam says that a goy, Rabbeinu Tam says that if a married woman has an affair with a goy, it's not gilu arayis. It's not gilu arayis, and Rabbeinu Tam, because a goy is not counted. It's like an animal. It's not counted in halacha like a human in this regarding this particular sin. And therefore, Rabbeinu Tam paskins that if a married woman to a yid, had an affair with a goy, and while she was married, and then the goy converted, and she divorces her husband divorces her, she's allowed to live with the goy, even though the general rule is that if a married woman commits adultery, she's forbidden to her husband and forbidden to this person, but not when it's a goy. That's what Rabbeinu Tam says. And then within Rabbeinu Tam, there's an argument. So if a married woman has an affair with a goy, is she allowed to live with her husband or not? The Miri and others learn Rabbeinu Tam holds yes, because it doesn't count at all, and others learn Rabbeinu Tam holds with her own husband, she cannot live. Just she couldn't, but regarding the goy, to live with the goy in the future, if he decides to convert, she can, because as far as this is concerned, even though she can no longer live with her husband, but it's not considered gila arayah, she doesn't have to die for it. Anyway.
Where's the place? Where's the English place?
Sorry?
The English place?
The English, what page we're up to?
3B2,
Yeah,
third
100%.
paragraph at the bottom. Ihochi.
Says the Gemara, if so, if you're telling me that if we change the day from Wednesday to Tuesday, what do we achieve? So the guy will come on Tuesday. They live somewhere else, they live in a little village, they'll come in on Tuesday and do the same thing. So what do we achieve? If everyone gets married the same day, what do we achieve? So he'll come on Tuesdays. What do we achieve? Since we didn't make an official institution that get married on Tuesday, so this guy is not going to travel all the way from his town to the village. Maybe there's something happening on Tuesday when quite possibly nothing's happening on Tuesday. So therefore, they're safe. Says the Gemara, he said, but don't get married on Monday because it's too far away from Thursday. And then by the time Thursday comes along, you're not going to go to court. You fell in love with her, you're not going to go to court. To Bezdin. Says the Gemara, but you said, but if it's an oinus, then you're permitted. What's an oinus? So we explained sakana that the hegman wants to have relations with her first. And that goes back one day, Tuesday. And noigin. But if it's an oinus, you go back to Monday. What's this oinus? So my oinus. We just said, if we're talking about the same thing, then why you change the word from sakana to oinus? And why we bring for Tuesday and Monday. And then you say that the nagu, the custom is they took it upon themselves Tuesday. And when it comes to oinus, you say that you're allowed to do it on Monday. It's not even a minig. What's going on here? Only as an individual. Omar Rava says, Rav, you know what oinus is? A whole different story. Oinus is you're preparing a home meal for the wedding and everything else. The army, they tell you, the army is coming to town. The general is coming to town. When he comes to town, he just takes all the feed that he can get to feed his army. He'll come and take all the food of the wedding. And you heard that he's coming on a certain day. He can bring you forward to Monday. And that's, get the chassid over and done with before the guy comes and takes all your food. What are we talking about? If the guy is coming for 1 or 2 days to town, then cancel the wedding and wait till next week, Wednesday. then wait till it's far better to do it on Wednesdays. If the army is passing through, they're coming through on one day, so cancel the wedding on the, you heard it's coming, don't have the wedding at all. Wait till next week. No, the army is coming and they're moving into town. This is their station now, and there's no point in waiting another week because we'll just take the food next week. Recover begimel. So you want to ask a question. So why not recover? So begimel me a lichna. So do it on Tuesday. He's coming to town on Wednesday. Why bring it forward to Monday? Go ahead and get married on Tuesday. We want to bring it as close as possible to Thursday. So isn't Tuesday better? Answer the Gemara. Asprava the day begimel kasi. They always have like a vanguard troops. They come before him to set up camp. They come in on Tuesday. So if they see the food on Tuesday, they'll confiscate all the food. So therefore, you bring the wedding forward to Monday. That's one way of learning. And the boy is saying there's another way of learning, and here starts a whole very interesting concept. So you probably have to learn it tomorrow because it's going into, but basically you learn it tomorrow. But basically the idea is that unfortunately the chassan's father or the kala's mother passed away on the day of the wedding. And what do you do? That's the oinus. If that's the oinus, we say, you know what? If you're gonna wait till Wednesday, or you're gonna wait till Tuesday, you're a novel. Once you're a novel, you can't have the wedding. You have to wait a whole week because you're sitting shiva. So if it passed away on a Monday, go ahead and have the chasna before you bury the person. Have the chuppah, have relations, and then you bury the person, and then you have first 7 days of Shabbat, and then you'll have 7 days of Shiva. And it's fascinating, some of the Rishonim here, how they learn that Shabbat brachas, the first day, the Rosh brings that the first day of Shabbat brachas is from the Torah. It's from a Torah to make 7 brachas. As it says in Shir Hashirim, B'yem chasanosai, B'yem simchas libay. First day is Mahatayra, so therefore Shabbat brachas is very important. There are those who believe that the first day of Avelis is Mahatayra as well. Anyway, and before you bury somebody, you're called an Einan. But over here, even an Einan is not allowed to have meat, not allowed to drink wine, and not allowed to have marital relations. But over here, we're going to ignore the fact you're an Einan. And the reason for that is, even though many hold that it's Mahatayra, and the reason why we ignore it is because the whole idea of an Einan is we want you to focus on the person who's deceased to bury them. But because we're saying we don't want you to start Shiva, and we don't want you to bury till after the chasna, so you're not thinking about burying, because there's no einan. And if there's no einan, therefore you can have meat, drink wine, and have marital relations. Actually, there's an argument you can have meat and wine, but definitely you can have marital relations. You learn all this tomorrow, is fascinating. But the other interesting thing is, it's only the father of the chassan or the mother of the kala, because the Gemara says, who takes care of the chassan? Mainly the father. He takes care of the wedding arrangement, all that. Who takes care of the kala? Mainly the mother. I guess that's how it was in those days. So they're the ones that if they're not there, there's a loss. Who's going to take care of the wedding? But if it's the other way around, the mother of the chassan or the father of the kala, we say, don't worry about cancel the wedding. You have to sit shiva first and then do the wedding because the surviving parents are going to make sure you have a beautiful wedding later on. Anyway, we'll stop over here. So tomorrow night, 6:30 punctually, Mitzvah, all those who will be coming and all those who will come.